This is the Wait For It podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wait For It podcast. I am your co-host Phil Barrera, aka Phil the Filipino.
And I'm your other co-host, Mr. Eric Almighty. And for this episode of Late to the Party, we are going to be talking about a film that has seemingly grown its legendary status over the years to the point where it is now being titled as one of the greatest films of all time. That may not be news to you, but it is news to us because we are late to the party on the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, and even when this film came out, it was actually, I believe, considered a bit of a failure because of the box office numbers, and not necessarily because of, I think, critical response, but also if you compare it to some of the other movies, Eric, that were nominated for Best Picture at this time, I think it really just ran into like a buzzsaw. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment. So very excited for those of you that are joining us for the first time, as well as returning listeners to Late to the Party, where we cover films, TV shows that we just missed out on. To be fair, I was 6 when this movie came out. Eric, I'm not sure how old you were. I know you were younger than me. But that being said, we have had 30 years to watch it. So hence Late to the Party. But very excited to talk about this one, Eric. And yeah, as you alluded to, one advised or acknowledged as one of the greatest films of all time, not only just because of the performances, but the story, screenplay, directing, cinematography, all that. Excited to dive into it. What did you know about this film before going into it? And also, just to get it out of the way now, listener, Eric thought this was something completely different. Are you going to give me some clues to guess, or are you just going to tell us?
Yeah, sure, I could do that. It should also be noticed. It should also be noted that this is a 30-year-old film. We are going to talk about spoilers very freely.
Just like us, you had plenty of time to watch The Shawshank Redemption.
This is
Family Guy didn't already spoil it, which it did for me.
Yeah. So no, not for me. I didn't get spoiled that way. That's a Family Guy clip maybe I didn't see. Honestly, in pop culture, this is not a movie that you hear a lot about. And when we talk about those other competing films that year, it came out in a year of huge pop culture films. So the fact that this kind of flew under the radar makes sense now, and that it's grown again over time in people's adoration for it. But with that being said, we are going to talk freely about the film, and that's important because I'll bring up the poster in a minute and what happens there. Phil, I've only ever seen the poster for this movie. Now, when I pressed play, the movie I thought I was going to be watching, I believe takes place with Nazi, like in Nazi Germany, or like it's a Nazi like movie.
Did you think this was Schindler's List?
I did. I was like 85% sure that this was Schindler's List, a movie that I have not seen.
I've not seen Schindler's List either. Yeah.
Okay, so before you guys yell at us, it will go on the list now.
Yell at me. Yell at her.
No, as of right now, going on the list of future movies we should probably watch. It's a 3-hour movie. Very, it's got Liam Neeson in it. It's a Steven Spielberg film, I believe. We're late to the party on that one, okay? But I always associated that poster with Schindler's List for some reason.
No.
So to find out that is just a guy covered in shit is kind of crazy. In a Prison Break movie, kind of crazy. That's that's where I'm at, Phil. I know absolutely going into this movie, I knew nothing about it other than the poster, which I thought was for a different movie.
Yeah, I mean, you said that it hasn't necessarily come up in pop culture. I will disagree a little bit because that image of Andy in the rain is iconic, and whether it be in meme or GIF form, whatever you want to call it. But that's really funny that you thought it was Schindler's List because I specifically, like I said, this movie was covered in Family Guy. It's basically the same, except obviously, Family Guide. But that's how I knew of this film, which is a little embarrassing to admit. But hey, we're millennials, so it is what it is. But it is a movie that I have always wanted to watch. And I just, brought it up on a whim, and it shot to the top of our list because of how highly regarded it is. So let's dive into The Shawshank Redemption. It was released in 1994 and directed by Frank Darabont. I hope that's how you pronounce it. I apologize, Frank, if that is not correct. Here is the Letterbox'd Synopsis. Imprisoned in the 1940s for the double murder of his wife and her lover, upstanding banker Andy Dufresne begins a new life at Shawshank Prison, where he puts his accounting skills to work for an amoral warden. During his long stretch in prison, Dufresne comes to be admired by the other inmates, including an older prisoner named Red for his integrity and unquenchable sense of hope. And these two main characters, Red and Andy, are played by Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. So it's crazy that Morgan Freeman, even in 1994, Eric, looked pretty old. Compared to, like, I think he's always been an older man, but this is certainly one of those performances that Morgan Freeman is associated with, and you definitely understand why. And I'll say this to kind of give it a to kind of compare it to something that is relatively newer in pop culture. If you're a person just like Eric and I who has played the video game A Way Out, and you have not watched The Shawshank Redemption, you should definitely watch The Shawshank Redemption. Do you agree with that, Eric?
I think to a certain extent, yeah. I definitely think this movie is more about the life in prison than the prison break, which we'll kind of talk about the nuances of all that. I would say if you've watched The Shawshank Redemption, you'd probably enjoy A Way Out more. So maybe reverse the roles on my end.
Yeah, you can definitely see where the inspirations for plenty of these prison break films, or just prison films in general, I'm sure they have taken quite a bit of inspiration from Shawshank. So let's circle back, Eric, and talk about those performances. You know, you talked about outside of Morgan Freeman, there weren't really a whole lot of names that we were necessarily familiar with. I know that Tim Robbins, is he in Top Gun? It says here he's in Top Gun, but I don't know who he plays. I don't think he's any of the characters that I remember. And if he is, someone somewhere is screaming at their radio or their phone and yelling at us for not knowing who he plays in Top Gun. But outside of that, outside of Morgan Freeman, there weren't really a whole lot of names we were familiar with. However, just shouting out first and foremost, the chemistry between Andy and Red carries this thing from beginning to end. As at its core, I think you could say that Shawshank is a story, as far as one of its main themes is about male friendship and, you know, the relationship between those two.
100%. And I mean, it's telling, and we'll talk about the Oscar story with this movie, but it's very telling that Morgan Freeman was the one nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role. So, I mean, it's very much his movie as it is Tim Robbins, but you are right. I'm not familiar with Tim Robbins' game. Not an actor that I've really kept up with. I would assume this is probably his most prominent role in his career. Correct us if we're wrong, but at the end of the day, Phil, I think this movie, everything it does from the standpoint of being in a prison is the movie, and the relationship not just with these two characters, the main two characters, but also the rest of the supporting cast. You very much feel like you're living through the life of these characters over the course of decades. And I think that's just a very interesting thing that this movie achieves, because it is a very dialogue heavy movie. Very, very dialogue heavy, very driven on its morals and the point that it's kind of giving to the audience. Sometimes that can feel a little bit melodramatic and maybe not as crowd pleasing, but I don't think this movie is aiming to do that. And maybe that's why it didn't perform very well when it first came out.
Yeah, I would very much want to know what the narrative was around the film, around the time that it came out. And listen, we've talked about this, and the Oscars is trying to kind of figure out how to or bring in more popular culture films that people are really watching. So I can imagine this being a film that, like in 1994, when we talk about some of these other movies, like we said, that we alluded to, that were nominated, that are very either action heavy, they're a pretty straightforward feel good story. I can only imagine that this, in terms of getting from point A to the incredible payoff, which we'll get to a little bit later, would probably be a little bit of looked at as a chore for like a standard moviegoer, and that is totally fine. You're talking to somebody who saw a lot of bad movies in 2024. I totally get it. So I assume that's probably what it was, Eric, is because it's so dialogue heavy, because there's not any action. It is more of it's the type of story I think now that if it came out today, it would be in television form, and we would get to learn about these characters more and more and kind of fall in love with them over time. You know, there have been plenty of modern day shows talking about prison reform and talking about how poor the conditions are in there. I mean, you talk about what was Orange is the New Black just a few years ago. That is not an accident that show was so popular. So, and obviously takes quite a bit of influence from the Shawshank Redemption. So that's what I would probably imagine it was, is just because it is so dialogue heavy. Audiences in 1994, I mean, what we're a year removed from like Jurassic Park coming out, you know, like though people were looking for those kind of experiences in the theater, as opposed to something like this.
You know, and the movies that came out at that time or around that time, Phil, is why I say in pop culture it doesn't really feel like it had made an impact at that time. Again, it's more of an overtime, and I wouldn't even say cult classic, but an overtime classic that among people who enjoy film have now put it up on the pedestal. It probably rightly deserved when it came out, because movies like Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, Little Women, The Lion King all came out in that span from when the Shawshank Redemption released, and were in the talks of award season for the Oscars. So a lot of big movies there, big hitter movies in pop culture. You did mention the poster, which again, even I knew of because of its iconicness. But other than that, which may be a shame because this movie is beautifully shot, which we'll talk about, I guess, maybe a little bit more in depth. But this movie has a lot of important moments, but nothing that ever really stood out that I've ever seen before that's constantly referenced in pop culture circles. It's more for like those film enthusiasts or those movie buffs that are thinking about this.
Sure. Yeah, let's definitely talk about that cinematography there, because you know, we just saw a film in 2024 that we very much loved. I liked it a little bit more, but we still both very much enjoyed Sing Sing. And one of the things that we loved about Sing Sing is just positioning the camera to kind of really drive home the idea that these people are stuck, and they're not going to be able to get out of the situation that they are in. It is a very gloomy and dark area, obviously, throughout the entire prison. You know, you really feel the sense of confinement like when you're in their cells. Obviously, a lot of those instances of violence are shot very specifically, like with the overhead view. The overhead view plays a really big role in this movie, and all the way up until the very end. So yeah, it is wonderfully shot, and I can only imagine that, again, people trying to get through movies like us that are so highly regarded in terms of the film world that you were alluding to, would very much acknowledge that. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because it is, boy, there are definitely some shots in here that I'll think about for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and that's where I mean, like, from a overall general standpoint, I don't know that this movie offers very much from memory that you'll think about from a pop culture standpoint, but from a film standpoint, this is absolutely, if just watching this film, whether you liked it or not, I feel like it's hard to walk away and not at least understand why people could potentially have it as a top 5 or maybe top 1 film of all time on their list. So I think in that way, it makes a lot of sense, but I really just enjoyed the way this movie looked. In 1994 film, that was a couple years before the same director made The Green Mile. And The Green Mile has a little bit more of that pop culture resonation, but I think this movie looks much better than that one. And that movie is not a bad movie by any means as far as how it is shot. But this one, I don't know, just feels like it's a couple levels in a league of its own when it's all said and done.
I haven't seen The Green Mile.
Well, you're a criminal. So
I mean, I know parts of what happens because, again, it's a 30-year-old movie, but yeah, I've never seen it. But Yeah,
That's good to know for the game later.
Oh, great.
For the more like this. I won't bring it up.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, I can't imagine anybody coming away from this and saying that they had a bad time. I did see some like Letterboxd comments that were like, "This is one of the most overrated films ever." We've watched that movie. It's called The Shining, so there's no way that this is this is one of the most overrated films ever made. That is absolutely no shot. So I'm hoping that some of the people that were upset at us for our Shining take, we get some points back because we enjoyed the Shawshank Redemption. And Eric just spoke really great about the Green Mile. So you know what? we know film.
Yeah, we watch movies.
We got this.
Yeah, I totally didn't think this was Schindler's List.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
We started off the
ahead a
episode
little bit
that way. Yeah,
that's true. Shit. Okay. Well, anyway.
Not great. I am curious, Phil, if there's any critiques of this film, because you just mentioned, maybe this is a good segue in a moment, because you just mentioned that somebody, and there are people out there that think this movie is highly overrated. Again, I just don't see how you can watch this film and feel like, even if it wasn't for you, it's overrated, because I see the appeal 100% from the performances to the way this movie was shot. When we talk about story, one of the elements that I really liked before maybe we talk about critiques of the film was the fact that this very much, it doesn't stray away from the uncomfortableness of the setting. So they're in prison. I mean, right off the bat, you kind of get an idea of like, yeah, in this story, this happens. Like, this is happening. This is not something that we're shying away from because it's a movie. Like, this is what happens in prison, in jail. This is what happens in these places and these settings. The whole tagline of fear can hold you prisoner, hope can set you free. It was very, very interesting, and I'll come back to a Letterboxd review that I saw that kind of encapsulates this. Very interesting to see the perspective of inside prison life and then brief glimpses of what it's like when you're finally out. I think this movie, for a story, people in prison eventually getting out or having an opportunity to get out, I feel like that's a trope that has been done multiple times, but I've never felt the effectiveness of the challenges of adjusting from that life to this one. Your life before prison, to your life in prison, to your life after prison, more than this particular film. So I think from a story perspective, it did do a lot of good things. My critiques more so have to do about maybe where this film ends up more than anything. So I kind of want, before I jump, that far ahead, to give you an opportunity to bring up any critiques, or if there were any other like real solid things you wanted to bring up about this film, fit them in here. But this might be a good transition on, for a movie with little flaws in our opinion, more than likely, what were they?
Yeah, first, I guess I will talk about, I'll touch on what you said as far as learning how people are adjusting to their lives before, during, and after. We get 3 instances of how characters are doing that here. Obviously, one of them is full of hope, another one ends very tragically, and then another one, you're kind of not sure how he's going to adjust once he gets out, and that, of course, is Morgan Freeman with Red. There's also a lot of symbolism and a lot of instances of religious persecution, because there is a warden in here that is committed to the Bible, is that the Bible will set you free, that whole thing. And I know a lot of people would be able to relate to that, especially in 2025. I think watching this now definitely gives you both the ability to get through those moments that Eric, you alluded to, that are a little bit rougher, that really show you how difficult this lifestyle is, depending on, like you said, we've seen so many of these stories that are similar that are also very brutal. So though they're probably, I don't want to say easy to get through now, but they're easier because we've seen so many stories. We know how poorly the prison system is run. We know that these people exist that are taking advantage of the prison system. So I think you'll be able to get through it there if you are worried about any type of like triggering imagery. In terms of, some of the other things that we've watched, this is on the lower scale, but for the time, I could understand through the 90s why it would be a little bit more difficult to get through. To transition into any types of critiques, I can't really think of too many off the top of my head, it is about, you told me it's 2.5 hours. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes, so it is a longer film because it is so dialogue heavy. It is something you really have to focus on, which feels like something we don't have to say about a movie, but here we are. we have to tell people. We're all guilty of it, myself included. So because there is a lot of that going on, you do have to very much pay attention. I looked away for like a second, and I knew that I had missed a very important conversation. I had to rewind the movie. So, but I can't think of anything that wouldn't come away as being really nitpicky. Maybe it'll come to me after you mention a couple of things, because I gave this a very high score, so I can't imagine that anything that I could say would be like anything that would be game breaking. Maybe because it's not a movie that I would rush to share with everybody, but I would share with people that like I know very much appreciate film and are in the same position as us in trying to catch up on some of these classics. But I wouldn't just show it to like, you want to come over and watch Shawshank Redemption? Not that kind of movie.
No, which is why where it ended up in my rating is interesting, because I acknowledge it kind of breaks my scale a little bit, because I do acknowledge that this is a all-time great film and I very much enjoyed it. But I do agree with you. This isn't a watch party type of movie. I would have to find the right type of person. So maybe it fits in my scoring, actually.
You want to have a Shawshank-themed birthday party this year?
I don't think so.
We crawl through. We do like a mock crawl through a sewer pipe.
Honestly, it's that's crazy. I also didn't know that this movie was a Stephen King adaptation. So that was was news to me. People can continue to say are probably one of the best adaptations, and I kind of see that. I can understand. Because, again, this movie has a lot going for it, but maybe this plays into my critique. I've never been a big Stephen King guy, right? So some parts of the story are, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that this movie is kind of straight-laced in its storytelling. There's not a lot of twists and turns, and not that every movie has to have one, but when your movie ultimately is a prison break movie. I know that's not what this film really is at its core, but it's a pretty big thing that happens at the end. I mean, that's kind of your payoff, is the prison break that you didn't expect to happen. I just felt like the build up to that, there wasn't enough twists and turns to really get me invested in that moment, as I've seen in other films. That being said, I also think that upon a rewatch, that could also be fixed a little bit, knowing the context of what happens. But in that same breath, I don't know that I have the stomach to watch this whole thing all over again, right? And that's from the uncomfortableness of some of the scenes, which again are handled very well. It's nothing we can't handle for a watch, but do I really want to watch this again? Yeah, if it was on, I would. And for the right person, I would put it on. But I don't know that I'm going out of my way to see this film a second time on my own merits, and I think that at least speaks to my particular taste. Phil, anything else you wanted to kind of throw out? Because there's really not much. Even those things are fairly nitpicky, but they will reflect in my score.
So here's how I'll put it, because if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know one of my favorite films is Goodfellas. And Goodfellas is a very heavy film. There's a lot of really bad things that happen in that movie, but there is also humor in it. So, you know, there is that. So the thing that separates Goodfellas and Shawshank Redemption, Goodfellas came out 4 years before this, so it's not like this is a crazy comparison. Two different types of films, obviously, but when we're talking about Goodfellas, I revisit Goodfellas because of the character work. I mean, we're talking about Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci. We're talking about three characters that are over-the-top charismatic, and also just over-the-top in terms of their mannerisms and how they carry themselves. When I think of Tim Robbins, when I think of Andy Dufresne, when I look back on it, I won't think of Andy Dufresne being an overly charismatic character, but I will think of him being as one of like the smartest film characters that I've ever come across. I'll think of Red as being one of the most loving and heartfelt characters that I've ever seen in film. But I won't equate that to a Goodfellas that I'll put on routinely, usually 2 or 3 times a year, just to watch, whereas I won't do that with Shawshank Redemption, where I do think they both belong in the same category in terms of film history, and people will probably agree with that in terms of rankings whenever you find like a all-time film list. But that's how I would explain it, I guess, Eric, if that makes sense.
I think that's totally fair. That makes a lot of sense. Before we get to scores, ratings, and then our personal scores and ratings, so the reception and ours, One of the Letterboxd comments I'm going to read is talking about how this movie first commercially failed to recover its budget during theaters and then basically failed to the film Pulp Fiction. And then at the Oscars, it was nominated but didn't win any thanks to the sweeping show by Forrest Gump. But over time, this movie has really continued to chip away and get the admiration that it deserves. And this comment at the end of this very long 5-star review, I think kind of summarizes how I feel, although my score will reflect a little differently. On an overall scale, The Shawshank Redemption stresses that based on the outlook of life, there are only two types of people. One who can be free in prison, while others who find themselves imprisoned, even in freedom. The message it is trying to resonate is clear. Fear can hold you prisoner, hope can set you free. And if we all give ourselves some hope, there's nothing we can't survive. Yes, it seems preachy at times, but even then, if there's ever been a movie that has earned the right to do this, it's The Shawshank Redemption. And I think that's a pretty fair comment to make for a film like this, and one that kind of resonated with me for the themes that I really enjoyed, while also understanding at times the movie doesn't always work, but those times are few, far, and in between. This movie is too beautifully shot, too well acted, and honestly encompasses everything I like to see from a story from start to finish, at least to have a one-time watch, and this one-time watch was very much worth it.
You ever read a Letterboxd review and you're like, why do I even do this? Why?
Why do we even do
I
a
go
podcast?
We go on Instagram, we're like, movie good. Movie pretty.
At some point, we're going to just start stealing all of this stuff from Letterboxd, or then just going the full ChatGPT route. I don't know which one, but whichever one it is, they're both wrong.
Neither will have us around for very much longer if we go that route. But let's talk about those reviews. Now, again, when you talk about Rotten Tomatoes, you're talking about over time. I don't know what it was back in 1994, but I can tell you right now, an 89% certified fresh tomato meter score, 98% popcorn meter score, so that is the user score. When it comes to IMDb, as Eric frequently mentions on his reviews that you can check out on TikTok and Instagram, you do not see high IMDb reviews, really, ever. This is a 9.3, and I believe, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I believe it's still the highest rated film on IMDb. It was as of a couple of years ago. I don't have that list up in front of me. Hold on, top rated movie, number 1. Yep, it is just barely edged out The Godfather, another undertaking that we've been putting off for quite some time. It's right before The Godfather, The Dark Knight, Godfather Part 2, and then a 1957 film called 12 Angry Men, which, Eric, I don't think we're ever going to watch. We have a limit as to how far back we will go. So,
especially you.
Yeah, no, 100% me. So, and then when we get to Letterboxd, 4.6. So we're talking about one of the highest reviewed films, one of the most highly regarded films in film history. And I'm right there, Eric. I gave this a 4.5. Again, because of the comparison to another film that is one of my favorites of all time, just that came around the same time, because I probably won't revisit this unless I really wanted to show it to somebody. It is just short of that for me. I can't say that it's absolutely perfect, but I would probably say that you and I are in the minority, because 52% of people that have scored this movie have given it a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and that is over 900,000 people.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think my rating specifically is based off of the fact that I think, and it's not to say that a movie like this can't be 5 stars. So again, if you give it 5, 4.5, even a 3.5 or a 3, like I understand in the realm of reality, those are all fair scores. Mine is right in the middle of all that at a 4 out of 5. And while there are other films that are heavier that I have like 5 stars or 4.5 stars, those are movies I would actively try to get people to watch with me. It's just something about this particular movie, and I think I'll feel differently on a rewatch potentially to solidify that score. It's just something about this movie. I don't know that unless it was the right person that I could take them on that journey, where some other movies, in my opinion, are so good despite their dark themes. I could take almost anyone to see it, or I would make that effort. For The Shawshank Redemption, I just did not have that same feeling, but that should not degrade a 4 out of 5 score. That is a top tier movie, and for the way that I grade films, not an easy score to achieve. I would even say I'd give it a 4.25 if we could bump it up, right? But we do that 0.5 scale on Letterboxd. So that is where I sit in film on my late to the party list before we
also,
go over.
Also, refresh my list before you go over mine.
Before I go over, well, I don't even have your list up. I figured you'd talk about your list. But,
that works. Cool. Perfect.
Okay, cool. For my list of late to the party films that we have seen, I think we've seen a total of 33 on this series. Mine is rated at 7. So Shawshank Redemption is in between films like Mad Max Fury Road and then Mitchell's versus the Machines. So very, very major difference between those. But it's under films like Top Gun Maverick, Paddington 2, Pretty Woman, Interstellar, Chernobyl, stuff like that. So it's up there.
If we ever put together a movie night with The Wheel, it would be absolute chaos.
Absolutely insane.
I can't imagine what that would look like. I'd like to see it.
Oh my god! I wouldn't, because I'm literally looking at the bottom of my list, and if I have to watch Shin Godzilla or The Shining or any of these movies,
what if we get 3 bad movies?
I'll kill myself. Where did this movie end up on your list?
Not too far from you. I have it number 5, right behind Paddington 2, and right behind Paddington 2, and right in front of Klaus at number 6. So. Top 5 for me in terms of late to the party. And then if you're curious in terms of just all the movies I've watched so far this year, which is 8, it's number 1 just based off score, edging out Companion. I think I could probably safely say this is better than Companion, but they have the same score. So I enjoyed both of those movies. So number 1 overall on my just watch list for 2025. So
Yeah, and that's why scoring is so objective and really just an interesting process. But with that being said, Film, I'm going to now use Letterboxd and IMDb's list to go over films that are more like this. And we're going to go over a couple and see how you feel. We learned you did not watch The Green Mile, so I don't have to bring up
that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Like, I have not watched a lot of, like, prison movies. So... We'll see how this goes.
You're going to be surprised how many non-prison movies are in this list.
Okay. Is it just like sad movies?
There's choices
this
here.
movie ends happy, obviously, but there's like a very sad moment in the middle.
No, there's some other ones. All right. So, I mean, there are some prison ones, but let's get to it. I'll start off with a prison one, one that we mentioned earlier. Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption or Sing Sing?
I'm going to have to go with recency bias and say Sing Sing. So, and I also gave it a 5 out of 5. So, I got to stick with Sing Sing.
Understandable. Would you rather watch the Shawshank Redemption or The Truman Show? Yeah.
Yeah. Weird.
Weird.
What have I given The Truman Show on here?
I need to rank it myself.
Yeah. I have to go with The Truman Show. It's more fun. This is a heavy movie. Again, this is going to be tough for Shawshank Redemption, I think, but I got to go with The Truman Show.
Man, all right. Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption?
I know what's coming. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Or Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban?
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, I see. I see what happened there.
Yeah.
I'll go Shawshank. I mean, the Harry Potter movies are fine, but I can't. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, that one might throw you off.
Yeah, no.
Let's do another prison one.
I understand how we got there, though.
Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption or Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence?
I have not seen Life.
You've never seen Life?
No.
That's crazy. Might need to add that to the list. That is crazy. Let's do another one.
Life in prison, correct? Is that what am I assuming correctly?
Yeah, it's a prison movie.
Oh, Bernie Mac is in this? Oh, I'd watch this.
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad. Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption or The Dark Knight?
The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight. Yeah. Listen, some things are easier than others.
Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption or Forrest Gump?
Forrest Gump.
Okay.
I was waiting for that one to come. It's Forrest Gump.
All right.
When we haven't seen Pulp Fiction, and honestly, I don't know that you guys want me to specifically. I'm just not a Tarantino guy, so
yeah, Phil would be harsh.
I think that would be a bad day for us, and I've already had some of those.
Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption or Saving Private Ryan?
Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah,
Saving Private Ryan. And that thing is, we're talking about heavy. That's no stroll in the park.
No, I understand. It's a great example, though, of a movie that I would actively try to find for people to watch.
You would center a day or a theme around it.
And then set up a recovery booth afterwards.
Yeah, right afterwards. You just have a big group therapy session.
Yeah, so I think you'd like a Green Mile. Tom Hanks, dude.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure I would. I just... Yeah.
Can't ask Schindler's List. Okay, I'll do this last one. Would you rather watch The Shawshank Redemption or Inception?
Inception. It's Inception. Okay. I'm sorry.
Did you even like this movie?
I did. Well, why? This isn't fair. Why don't you have the answer?
I'm the one who does the game, dude. Sorry. This is revenge for the What Did I Miss episode in Cahoots. Yeah.
If you guys haven't listened to What Did I Miss, I introduced a new game that's probably going to stick around.
Jonathan?
And Eric did not do very well. So
no, I did not.
Shout out to Cade, who dominated. So
dominated. Yeah. You'll never be invited back. So
I don't know. I got you, Cade.
I'm done with my More Like This list, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. And always fun to see, compared to films we have seen, what that kind of looks like from Phil's perspective. And I would agree with a lot of those, honestly, even though this movie was very, very good. A quick update, because I forgot that I follow my brother, and he has been going ham on reviews, talking about not being a Tarantino guy. He gave Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a 2.5. So I think
also never seen that.
I think if people want to get mad at anybody, be mad at him. Yeah, let me just throw all of his business out of here. What did he... Actually, no. He gave Pulp
Amelia
Fiction
Perez
a 4.5.
does have 2. Okay. Unfortunately, Amelia Perez does have 2 wins. It did win. We expected it to win for best original song or whatever. So.
Yeah. What was the other one?
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I don't even care what the other one was. That being said, yeah. Before we lose track of the plot here, Phil, that's all I got. Shawshank Redemption, great watch. Really glad that we checked it out.
Shawshank in the books.
Yep. And I will no longer confuse it with Schindler's List. So that alone, a win.
That's so funny. But yeah, did you also get spoiled? Did the plot of Shawshank Redemption also get spoiled by Family Guy? Let me know. Let us know. You can do that a multitude of ways. Head to the Linktree link in the show notes, and you'll find all of our social media pages. The most important ones to keep up with being Instagram, TikTok, our growing Discord channel, YouTube. We also post videos on YouTube, and we are very active in those communities. We also stream on Twitch every other week. March is going to be a little bit different because I am, a little life update for all of you listeners, I'm doing a voice acting 101 class in the month of March and a little bit into April, so very excited, and I'll keep you guys up to date on that. You can also head it over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Give us 5-star reviews, a thumbs up, whatever it may be. Those are so beneficial. Thank you to all of those that have already done so. We see those reviews, we see those replies, and it just makes us feel good. We thank you guys so very, very much. And if you find yourself wanting to get some extra perks and join a very, very special community known as the Weight Watchers, Eric will let you know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so if you'd like exclusive perks like behind the scenes and early access to episodes like this one, we recommend you show your support additionally over on Patreon, where patrons like Briar, Stefan, T3 Cato, Corey from The World Is My Burrito, and Vintage and Bridget from Retro AV Rewind are supporting us monthly on that platform in exchange for those perks and more. So check us out there. We're loving the community vibes that we're starting to build this year, but all the free stuff is great as well. So if you're able to do any of that, the likes, the comments, the shares, the listens, the engagement, all goes a mile and beyond in the world of podcasting. With all that being said, my name is Mr. Eric Almighty. That is my co-host, Phil the Filipino. And please do not forget, we release new episodes for the podcast every Wednesday with bonus content on platforms like Twitch and TikTok. And all you got to do is wait for it.
This is the Wait For It podcast.